The night it vanished, imagine this. It's just after midnight on March 8th, 2014. At Kuala Lumpur International Airport, the air buzzes with the usual rhythm of a busy night. Families hug, business travelers scroll through their phones, and pilots prepare for another routine flight. Among them is Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777 scheduled to fly from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. On board, 239 souls, passengers and crew who had no idea they were stepping into one of the greatest mysteries of the modern era. The flight was supposed to be uneventful, a red-eye, lasting just under 6 hours, carrying students returning to school, families heading home, and vacationers wrapping up their holidays. The captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, was an experienced 53-year-old pilot with more than 18,000 hours of flying time. The co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid, just 27, was fresh-faced but competent, nearing the end of his training on the Boeing 777. The aircraft pushed back from the gate at 12:41 a.m. It was a clear night. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. As the plane climbed smoothly into the dark sky, passengers likely settled in, adjusting seats, pulling out blankets, or trying to get some sleep. The cabin lights dimmed, and for most, it was just another flight. But less than an hour later, everything changed. At 1:19 a.m., as MH370 crossed from Malaysian into Vietnamese airspace, air traffic control radioed the crew. The response came from the cockpit. "Good night, Malaysian 370. It sounded calm, routine. Those words would become the last confirmed communication from a plane. Minutes later, MH370's transponder, the device that identifies the plane's position to radar, suddenly went dark. Civilian air traffic control lost sight of the aircraft. To the controllers, it was as if the massive Boeing 777 had vanished from the sky. But military radar painted a different picture. According to later reports, the plane didn't crash right away. Instead, it made a sharp turn west, flying back over Malaysia, then out across the Strait of Malacca. It was as though someone, or something, had deliberately changed its course. Why would a plane bound for Beijing suddenly reverse direction without explanation? And why was a transponder shut off, something that isn't supposed to happen unless done manually? For hours, MH370 kept flying. Passengers slept, unaware. Families back home had no idea anything was wrong. Even air traffic controllers, at first, thought it might just be a communications glitch. But as time passed and the plane failed to check in, the sinking realization grew. Something was terribly wrong. By 6:30 a.m., when MH370 was due to land in Beijing, families had gathered at the arrivals hall, waiting to greet their loved ones. Screens showed landed for other flights. But next to MH370's flight number, the word lingered, delayed. Minutes stretched into hours. Airport officials tried to reassure anxious families, saying the plane might have lost contact but could still be in the air. But as daylight spread across Asia, the truth could no longer be denied. The Boeing 777 was missing. The news exploded worldwide. How could a modern aircraft, equipped with advanced communication systems, flown by trained pilots, tracked by radar, simply disappear? Within hours, search and rescue teams mobilized. Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, and Thailand dispatched aircraft and ships. The South China Sea, where the plane was last seen on civilian radar, became the focus of desperate scanning. But here's the chilling part. They found nothing. No wreckage, no distress signal, no floating debris. Imagine the families watching the news in real time, realizing their loved ones were not just late, they were gone. Mothers, fathers, children, entire families had vanished into thin air. And so, the night that began like any other became the start of a nightmare. A night when 239 people disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only questions. Who turned the plane around? Why was communication cut? And perhaps the most terrifying question of all, where did MH370 go? These questions would spark one of the most expensive and extensive search operations in aviation history, and one of the deepest mysteries the world has ever faced. The search that shocked the world when Flight MH370 was officially declared missing. The world responded with urgency. This wasn't just a small aircraft lost in bad weather. This was a Boeing 777, one of the safest and most reliable planes ever built, carrying 239 people. Its disappearance was unthinkable. In the first few days, search teams scoured the South China Sea, the area where the plane was last seen on civilian radar. Dozens of ships and aircraft from Malaysia, Vietnam, and China crisscrossed the waters, expecting at any moment to find life jackets, floating debris, or, at the very least, signs of a crash. But there was nothing. Not a seat cushion, not an oil slick, not even a fragment of metal. The world held its breath. Families camped at airports, clinging to the hope that their loved ones might still be alive. After all, without wreckage, how could anyone say for sure that the plane had crashed? Then came a stunning revelation. Military radar, reviewed after the disappearance, showed MH370 had not gone down in the South China Sea at all. Instead, it had turned sharply west, crossed the Malaysian peninsula, and headed out over the Andaman Sea. This completely changed the search. The aircraft had been flying for hours after it lost contact. But if it wasn't heading toward Beijing anymore, where was it going? And why? To answer that, investigators turned to something most people had never heard of before: satellite handshakes. The aircraft's communication system, though disabled for voice data, still exchanged hourly signals with an Inmarsat satellite orbiting 22,000 miles above the Earth. These signals didn't reveal exact coordinates, but they provided arcs, curved lines across the globe where the plane could have been. The final handshake, recorded at 8:19 a.m., showed the plane's last possible position along two enormous corridors, one stretching north towards Central Asia, and one stretching south into the empty Indian Ocean. The northern route seemed impossible. It would have meant flying undetected over heavily monitored airspace. That left the southern corridor, leading into one of the most remote and unforgiving stretches of ocean on Earth. And so began the most expensive search in aviation history. More than 26 countries joined the effort. Sophisticated naval ships, sonar equipment, underwater drones, and aircraft combed an area covering millions of square miles. The operation stretched from the waters west of Australia to the southern reaches of the Indian Ocean. But the search was a logistical nightmare. The Indian Ocean is vast, deep, and unpredictable. Waves towered, storms raged, and the seafloor lay miles beneath the surface. Searching, it was like looking for a single car in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Only this desert moved constantly with the wind and current. Month after month, crews scoured the waters. Every possible lead, oil slicks, floating objects spotted by satellites, turned up false. Families of the missing passengers grew more desperate. Some accused the Malaysian government of incompetence or even cover-ups. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire online. By the end of 2014, nearly a year after the disappearance, the plane was still missing. The search had cost hundreds of millions of dollars, yet not a single confirmed piece of MH370 had been found. Imagine the anguish of the families. Every time a new report surfaced, possible wreckage spotted, debris detected, they held their breath. And every time, it ended in disappointment. People around the world began asking the same haunting question: how could a massive aircraft with advanced technology, in the age of satellites, smartphones, and constant surveillance, simply vanish? It seemed impossible, and yet it had happened. In early 2015, the search was redirected to a narrower zone, based on refined satellite analysis. Hopes were raised once again. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott even declared, "We are confident that we know where the plane is." But as weeks turned into months, confidence faded. The ocean refused to give up its secret. Finally, in January 2017, after nearly 3 years of combing the seafloor, the official search was suspended. Thousands of square miles have been mapped, but the Boeing 777 remained elusive. The disappearance of MH370 had become more than just a tragedy. It was a global obsession, a mystery that united experts, governments, and ordinary people in one haunting thought. If this could happen to a modern plane, could it happen again? But just when the world began to lose hope, the ocean would finally start to whisper back. Because in the months and years that followed, small but chilling clues would begin washing ashore on distant beaches. Fragments of MH370 that deepened the mystery instead of solving it. The theories, what could have happened? When a plane vanishes without a trace, theories fill the void. And in the case of MH370, speculation turned into a storm. With no wreckage and no survivors, people around the world asked the same question. What really happened up there? Number 1. Mechanical failure. The most straightforward explanation is that MH370 suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure. A fire in the cargo hold, a sudden decompression, or a systems breakdown could have disabled the plane. Some experts suggested that a fire might have filled the cockpit with smoke, incapacitating the pilots, leaving the plane to fly on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. This would explain why it flew for hours after disappearing from radar. But here's the issue. If it had been a straightforward mechanical problem, why turn off the transponder? Why deviate so sharply from the planned route? Planes in distress typically send out mayday calls. Yet MH370 was silent. Too silent. Number 2. Pilot involvement. This theory is perhaps the most chilling. Could the disappearance have been intentional? Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, the senior pilot, became a central figure in speculation. Investigators learned he had a home flight simulator, and within it, they found a route eerily similar to MH370's final suspected path into the Indian Ocean. Was this evidence of premeditation? Some argued Zahari may have deliberately depressurized the cabin, rendering passengers unconscious before steering the plane into oblivion. Others insisted he was a professional with no motive to kill 238 people. His family and friends strongly rejected the theory. What about the co-pilot, Farrokh Abdul Hamid? He was young, with a clean record. But skeptics argued that even an experienced pilot could act unpredictably under hidden stress. Still, no evidence of motive or planning ever surfaced for him either. If the cockpit crew wasn't responsible, could someone else have taken control? Number 3. Hijacking. In the days after the disappearance, suspicion fell on the passengers. 2 Iranian men on board had used stolen passports, sparking fears of terrorism. But investigations quickly revealed they were asylum seekers, not extremists. So, could hijackers have stormed the cockpit, disabled communications, and flown the plane off course? It's possible, but who and to what end? No terrorist group ever claimed responsibility. And if it was hijacking, why fly deep into the Indian Ocean, far from any political or symbolic target? Unless, of course, the plan itself went wrong. Number 4. A military incident. Another theory is darker still. What if MH370 was accidentally shot down? The plane's sudden turn west took it across sensitive military zones. Some believe it might have been mistaken for a hostile aircraft, targeted and destroyed. If so, could governments have covered it up? There's precedent. In 1988, Iran Air Flight 655 was shot down by a U.S. Navy cruiser. In 1983, Korean Air Flight 007 was downed by a Soviet fighter jet. Both were mistakes with devastating consequences. But critics argue that in the age of global media and satellite tracking, hiding such an act involving 239 people would be nearly impossible. Still, the silence and confusion surrounding MH370 keep the suspicion alive. Number 5. Something stranger? With each unanswered question, wilder theories emerged. Some suggested the plane was secretly landed on a remote airstrip. Others claimed it was hijacked for its cargo. A few even speculated about government conspiracies, intelligence agencies, and shadow operations. And then there are the outlandish ideas: alien abductions, wormholes, time distortions. While fascinating to read, they reflect the desperation people feel when real answers are scarce. The problem with every theory: here's the unsettling truth. None of the theories fully explain the facts. If it was mechanical failure, why the deliberate course changes? If it was suicide by pilot, why leave no clear message or motive? If it was terrorism, why has no group claimed responsibility? If it was military error, why hide the wreckage so well? Every theory answers one question, but raises three more. The disappearance of MH370 is like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. And with each possibility comes a more disturbing thought. If we can't figure out what happened, how can we stop it from happening again? But just when it seemed the mystery would remain unsolved forever, the ocean itself began to speak, carrying fragments of MH370 to distant shores, thousands of miles away from where anyone expected. The clues that washed ashore for more than a year after MH370 vanished, the ocean was silent. Search teams scanned millions of square miles, but the waves gave nothing back. Families were left with nothing but questions, clinging to fading hope. Then, in July 2015, hope and horror collided. On the shores of Réunion Island, a French territory east of Madagascar, locals found a large, barnacle-encrusted object washed up on the sand. It was unmistakably part of a plane, a flaperon, a section of the wing that helps control lift. Investigators rushed in. Within days, French authorities confirmed what the world had been waiting for. The flaperon belonged to Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. For the first time since that night in March 2014, there was physical proof. The plane had gone into the ocean, but the discovery raised as many questions as it answered. The flaperon had traveled thousands of miles from the suspected crash site in the southern Indian Ocean to Réunion Island. Ocean currents can indeed carry debris vast distances, but it was still unsettling. How could such a huge search effort have missed the wreckage if pieces were floating freely? In the months and years that followed, more fragments surfaced. In Mozambique, a piece of horizontal stabilizer. In South Africa, a piece of the engine cowling with the words Rolls-Royce still visible. In Madagascar, interior cabin parts, including what appeared to be a seat armrest. In Mauritius and Tanzania, more sections of wing and fuselage. By 2017, at least 33 confirmed or likely pieces of MH370 had been recovered from beaches around the western Indian Ocean. Each fragment was like a whisper from the deep, proof that the plane had indeed ended in the ocean. Yet the wreckage revealed frustratingly little about how or why it happened. Some experts studied the flaperon closely. The way it had broken off suggested the plane hit the water hard, possibly in a steep dive. That would support the theory that MH370 ran out of fuel and plunged into the sea at high speed. But other evidence seemed to contradict that. Certain parts showed barnacle growth, which suggested they had floated gently for some time before washing ashore. If the plane had shattered violently on impact, wouldn't there have been more debris, more floating wreckage? The debris gave clues, yes, but no definitive answers. For the families, each discovery was a double-edged sword. On one hand, confirmation. Their loved ones had not been kidnapped, nor were they secretly alive somewhere. On the other hand, heartbreak. The reality of their deaths was undeniable. Imagine being a mother handed a small, corroded piece of metal and being told, "This is what remains of your child's flight." It's closure, but not the kind anyone wanted. The debris also fueled debates. Some insisted it proved MH370 crashed violently. Others believed it suggested a more controlled ditching. And still others claimed the slow trickle of fragments hinted at something being hidden, that perhaps officials already knew more than they admitted. Why, for example, were so many pieces found thousands of miles from the original search zone? Did the plane drift farther than expected, or was the crash site miscalculated from the start? Even oceanographers struggled. The Indian Ocean is one of the least understood and most unpredictable bodies of water in the world. Its currents shift with the seasons, creating a swirling conveyor belt capable of moving debris across continents. Pinpointing the origin of a single flaperon from its landing point on a beach was like trying to trace a leaf back to the tree it fell from after it's been carried downriver for months. Despite years of searching, no large sections of the fuselage were ever recovered. No black boxes were found. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, the holy grails of crash investigations, remain missing to this day. And that may be the most chilling fact of all. In aviation history, nearly every mystery is solved once the black boxes are recovered. But for MH370, they remain somewhere at the bottom of the Indian Ocean, silent, holding answers that no one has yet unlocked. The debris gave the world fragments of truth, but not the full story. Instead, it deepened the mystery, keeping alive every theory, every haunting possibility. Because if the plane really dove into the ocean, what or who guided it there? And more importantly, will we ever know? The mystery that still haunts us, it's been more than a decade since Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 disappeared, and yet the case feels as unresolved as it did on that March morning in 2014. The fragments found on distant shores prove the plane ended in the Indian Ocean. But the why and the how remain painfully out of reach. For the families of the 239 passengers and crew, the absence of answers is unbearable. Many live in a strange limbo, forced to grieve without truly knowing what happened in their loved ones' final moments. Some cling to the hope that new evidence will emerge. Others feel abandoned, convinced that the full truth is being kept from them. Each anniversary of the disappearance brings vigils, memorials, and renewed calls for answers. Photographs of smiling faces, children, newlyweds, grandparents, are displayed in airports and public squares, reminders that this mystery is not just about a plane, but about people. Governments, too, remain haunted. Malaysia, already under scrutiny for how it handled the crisis in the early days, continues to face criticism. China, which lost 153 citizens on board, has pressed for accountability. And Australia, which led much of the ocean search, admits the case is still one of the greatest challenges it has ever faced. In 2018, the private company Ocean Infinity launched a new search under a no-find, no-fee agreement with Malaysia. Using advanced underwater drones, they combed through thousands of additional square miles of seabed. Once again, hope surged. Once again, the ocean remained silent. The search was called off after 6 months. MH370 had evaded discovery yet again. And so, the mystery persists. Experts say the wreckage likely lies on the seabed, in waters so remote and so deep that recovering it may take decades, or may never happen at all. The black boxes, designed to emit locator signals for just 30 days, have long since gone silent. Unless by chance or breakthrough technology the wreckage is found, the final truth may remain forever hidden beneath miles of ocean. But the human mind doesn't rest easily with unanswered questions. And so theories continue to swirl. Some still point to the pilot, others to hijackers, others whisper about cover-ups, secrets too dark to reveal. The case has become more than an aviation tragedy. It has become a canvas for humanity's deepest fears. Fear of technology failing. Fear of betrayal from those we trust. Fear of vanishing without explanation, leaving loved ones behind in torment. Think about it. We live in an age where smartphones can track our every move, satellites can read license plates from space, and airplanes constantly ping their positions. Yet somehow, one of the world's largest commercial aircraft managed to vanish as if it slipped between the cracks of reality. And that's what makes MH370 so haunting. It reminds us that even in a world of constant surveillance, mysteries can still exist. Today, pieces of MH370 are displayed in museums and aviation labs, solemn relics of a modern ghost story. Families still gather to light candles. Documentaries, books, and investigations continue to explore every possible angle. And whenever another plane goes missing, even briefly, the shadow of MH370 looms. It's not just about aviation. It's about the fragility of certainty, the uncomfortable truth that not everything can be explained. So where does that leave us? Maybe one day, technology will uncover the wreckage. Maybe the black boxes will be pulled from the depths, their data intact, finally telling us what happened in those final hours. Or maybe, like so many mysteries before, MH370 will remain unsolved, a wound in history that never fully closes. Until then, one question will always hang in the air. How does a plane with 239 people on board simply vanish in the modern world? And perhaps the scarier question is, if it happened once, could it happen again?